Hey friends, Dr. Willow and I are so eager to invite you to an incredible live event with us and some of our most incredible colleagues, experts in the field of sexuality and love and relationships and sex, and it's totally free.
Oh my gosh, we've got such an incredible lineup for you. They're going to be talking about how to activate orgasm, how to have better morning wood, how to use BDSM and kink play to heal your mind and your psyche. What an incredible array of speakers we have. They're coming live. It's on July 23rd and 24th.
And there will be a replay. So if you can't come, still register and you can take advantage of our replay window. And if you want to binge on this as many times as you want, we'll make that possible for a small fee. So head on over to sexreimagined.com/power-of-pleasure to get signed up. We can't wait to see you there.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sex Reimagined podcast. I'm Dr. Willow Brown. I'm here with my amazing co-host, Leo Piper. What if your deepest desires were the path, not the problem? Today's guest, Layla Martin, says that your pleasure is holy, your sexuality is sacred, and your turn-on could be the most potent spiritual practice you've been avoiding. She is a global leader in Tantra, founder of the Tantra Institute and Integrated Sexuality. She has trained in everything from neuroscience to shamanic arts and sex magic.
You know, you guys, if you haven't heard of Layla Martin by now, are you living under a rock? I mean, her videos are all over the place. Facebook, YouTube, you name it. So this is the interview you've been waiting for. So tune in, baby, turn on, and fall in love with Layla Martin.
Welcome to the Sex Reimagined podcast, where sex is shame-free and pleasure-forward. Let's get into the show.
We are so thrilled to have you today with us, Layla, so welcome.
Oh, amazing. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for being with us today. For our audience who may not have met you yet, what got you into doing this work? I know that you had sort of more challenging childhood, and so much of your healing and sexual exploration has really brought you to where you're at today. It's really remarkable. So give us a little 101 on your
What's
history.
the genesis story, Layla?
A combination of religious trauma, sexual trauma, personal interest, and feminist outrage. So
sounds about right.
I had a challenging childhood. My mom and my biological father, my mom was very young when she had me, and she was taking care of me, and he came home and he said, "I've been cheating on you and I don't want to be with you anymore." And she just uncovered all of these lies and all of this darkness from him. And during this time when they had joint custody, he was sexually abusive and just a very, very, very horrible person. The last time I saw him was when I was 7.
Wow.
They had joint custody for a while. And then, and so that was the origin of feeling that something had been taken inside of my soul and inside of my body. So when I started hitting puberty, I was so terrified of my body that I would shower in a bathing suit. I would obsessively shave all the hairs off my body. I would pray to God every single night, because I was raised Catholic, that I would never turn into a woman, because it was so terrifying to feel this emergence of my sexuality after experiencing that kind of sexual abuse. And for whatever reason, I don't know that they were linked. It almost feels like a different part of my being. Mm-hmm. When I was 14, I found a trip in the back of the New York Times that went to Tibet, India, and Nepal. And I begged my mom and my stepdad to send me, and bless them, they let me go.
That's amazing. You're only 14 years old.
Did you go with other friends?
Them.
Or you're just like, solo, I got to go to Nepal. I'm 14. I'm going to do this like without anyone with you? That would be so adventurous. And I would be so intimidated to do that at 14.
Oh, well, so the first trip I went on alone was actually to Italy when I was 15.
Okay.
That trip was actually guided by two 20. I think they were about 20 years old. So I was like, oh, we've got adults looking out for us. And I'm like, what the hell?
Totally.
That's funny.
So I had an early touch points to Kashmir Shaivism and the beautiful sacred lands of India. We got to go to blessed monasteries in Tibet. I feel so blessed and privileged to be able to have witnessed the wisdom and the profundity of those cultures and the way that they stewarded spiritual practice and tradition and wisdom. And for me, being raised Catholic, it was eye-opening to see a spiritual tradition that was about your connection to God rather than being told who and what God was, and specifically how God wanted you to behave as a woman.
Yeah.
And so I had this combination when I turned 17 and I went to Stanford University of knowing these wisdom traditions existed and also really coming to terms with the depth and magnitude of my trauma. Like the first time I saw my boyfriend's penis, who was like a loving, beautiful, wonderful human, as a teenager, I went into a full freeze trauma response. I couldn't even speak for about 30 minutes. That's how intense my sexual trauma was. And I didn't really have words for it. I didn't understand it back then. Our society has grown in leaps and bounds in the last 20, 30 years around what trauma is and how to talk about it and how to understand it, even understanding the depth and impact and brutality of what can happen to a child's nervous system when they experience that kind of trauma. So I had the righteous outrage of a teenager, and I was like, wait, I've been through this kind of pain. Everybody else has been through this, not everybody else, but so many people have been through this kind of pain. And we don't have healing centers on every street corner. Like, it's not known how to heal yourself from this level and depth of trauma and heartbreak. And so I went looking for, how do you heal yourself when you've been traumatized? And also I found the sex education at Stanford University. I was in the pre-med department, seriously lacking, because I wanted to know how to fix my soul. I wanted to know how to fall back in love with my body. I wanted to know how to stop screaming during sex when I was having a trauma response. And they were like, where's the average age of a woman when she gets pregnant? And I was like, what the hell?
My gosh.
Yeah. So then you had to create your own education. So where did you go? How did you find those answers?
Yeah. So I went back. I took a break from Stanford when I was 18, and I bought a one-way ticket to Asia. And I spent 2 years studying meditation and my first Kundalini practices, my first early Tantric practices. And it was so clear to me that there was something there that allowed a healing and a restoration of the body, heart, and soul that I was not finding anywhere in my Western education.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back and forth for a while, and I, in my science education, learned a lot about the nervous system and psychology and had a deep respect for science. But I found that my soul's healing was there in Asia. And I learned both neo and classical tantric practices, so both the classical thousands of years old tradition of Tantra and the newer practices of how to awaken and heal your eros through things like a pussy massage or a penis massage or chakra breathing and deep activation of your erotic body through things like breath work. And the combination of the two restored a sense of dignity and power and in loveness to my body. And one of the biggest hallmarks of the Tantric philosophy that really changed everything was your body is just as sacred as prayer. Your body is just as much a portal to God as any temple you could ever pray in. Mm-hmm. And understanding my body in that way helped heal all of the religious shame and eventually most of the trauma. And I had this deep dedication where I was like, look, if I had to go through this layer of hell, like, I don't want to just be a survivor. I want to come out on the other side saying that I am better off and I'm having more exquisite orgasms, that I can be in an even deeper devotional partnership than if I had never had to do this healing in the first place. And that was the vision that I set for myself. And what I found was all of these practices that helped make that a possibility, because so much of what I was encountering just in the scientific literature or just in Western education wasn't enough for me to find this celebratory portal into my nervous system and through sexuality all the way to the erotic. And it ended up being this deep realization that sex is where we hold our deepest shadows on this planet, but it is also where we can have some of our highest prayer and deepest intimacy and most profound love.
That's so
Yeah.
beautiful. And it's so beautiful too how Tantra really does bring so many through that healing portal. Like so many of us enter into the Tantric realm because of sexual trauma, because of, even if it's a collective trauma or, societal trauma, or if it's a more, overt trauma as well. And
All the traumas.
all the traumas. Yeah. And it's
Big
just so
T's and little T's. A
Totally.
lot of people are walking in because something in their soul, and they may not even know it consciously, but somewhere in their soul, they know there's something more, and they know that they want it. And they know that there is something that is, I don't know, off, isn't operating at its full potential. There's obstacles in the way of getting the love that they most desire.
Yeah.
I have a very similar story as you. But mine was such a deep, dark secret. It was, I didn't want anyone to know that I was really broken inside and was undeserving of love. And then I go to my first weekend seminar and they're doing all this stuff on sexual healing. And I'm like, oh, fuck, I'm going to have to encounter this. And I didn't think I would ever encounter it in my whole life. I remember praying to God and go, just let me suppress it like everybody else. Why is it that everyone else gets to forget this fucking shit? And I remember every freaking detail. Can't you take this away?
Wow.
But as someone who feels so much forgiveness and wholeness and so much purpose and so much gratitude for all of that because of what I get to do now, it's really weird to keep calling it that because I actually no longer hold it that way. I just use it because I know it helps others. How do you feel in the holding of that original story, having done so much healing on it?
Similar to you, I think, when I'm talking about it now from a more healed place, I also want to pause and acknowledge anyone who's not there yet. Because before I felt this healed, it was like a crater in the most sensitive parts of myself. It was like a black hole that could suck me in at any moment into an ocean of sorrow or grief or self-hatred. And so for anyone who's not yet at that level of healing, I just want to acknowledge the depth and pain that I was in, that I can imagine you are in, and how real and painful that is. And I thought I could heal it very quickly. And I was like 5 years in and I was like, damn it. And I was like 10 years in and I was like, I'm working so hard.
Yeah.
And even I would say that, it took about 5 years to be able to feel pleasure and celebration and joy in my body, and 10 years to feel like I felt good on a daily basis rather than the echoes of trauma all throughout my nervous system as I was going about my day. But I would only say that it's very recently that I was able to have a full power match relationship with a man that I'm deeply in love with, who's deeply devoted to me, and to finally find myself exquisitely beautiful and desirable in that partnership. And to answer your question, I literally yesterday was like looking back and I could feel how much I suffered in childhood, how much I suffered as a teenager, how many times I told myself that I was so ugly and so horrible, and just like my skin would crawl with this disgust, and how that destroyed so many early partnerships, how I couldn't even see what was possible for me in love. And from this vantage point, from this consciousness now, I'm like, wow, of course, this is what you would do. Of course you would form a healthy, beautiful partnership with like a sacred masculine king if you're a heterosexual or a divine empowered being, regardless of gender. And I only even got there very, very recently. And there is something that is very true about my relationship to my trauma, which is now that I have loved my inner child and even my inner baby, like pre-verbal parts of myself, all the way to the core, and I can predominantly live my soul's truth rather than my trauma. And I really feel the gifts, as you're talking about, from a life that was filled with grit and some level of emotional hardship and all the gifts that gave me. Then no, it doesn't really matter what happened in the 1980s anymore. Like if anything, it's like, it's so, life feels so magnificent now. And my nervous system has been so updated that the past doesn't weigh on me So the past doesn't matter, but at one time it really did.
Well, what I really love what you just said, Layla, and I want to highlight is like just yesterday you were looking back, like after how many decades of doing this work, of healing yourself, of teaching the work. When you teach it, you'll learn it so much more, right? And
Yeah.
sharing it with thousands of women around the world, like you've done so many layers of this work at such a deep level. It is your life. It is you. You walk it, you talk it, you breathe it. And even just yesterday, you still look back and like have a big aha about like, wow, how far you've come and how far you are away from it. So I feel like that just reminds all of us who are on the path that like the expansion, the Tantra of life is ever expanding and ever evolving. And we always get to see from a new perspective, like how far we've come. It's really quite remarkable.
When you look back, right, on that little Layla who just had all this disgust and self-loathing and probably looked in the mirror and didn't see what everyone else saw. Like, I think about that Leah all the time. And I have so much grief for her. I mean, I think about like, my God, you spent years thinking you were hideous.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, ladies, we want you to mark your calendar for October 5th through the 12th, 2025, because we're taking you on an epic pilgrimage to Crete.
That's right. We're doing a beautiful retreat called Awakening the Goddess, where we are going to nurture ourselves from the inside out. You're going to be learning all kinds of sacred sexual practices from both the Taoist and the Tantric perspective. We'll be doing yoga every day. We'll be going and visiting sacred sites and really harnessing the energy of the primordial goddess, meaning the original divine feminine energy that is so alive on this island. I was just there last year and it was a game changer for me. And I was like, Leah, we got to put together the retreat that I want to go to. So this is it.
Yeah, there's something very special about women coming together and healing and awakening each other's Shakti to really resolve some of the blocks, some of the hurts, some of the traumas from the past, to shed that dead weight so that you can become more alive. You can become more magnetic, cultivating trust, cultivating vulnerability, cultivating presence, coming into a new state of consciousness in the arms of a group of really amazing women, sisters, and friends you're going to have for a lifetime, including Willow and I. So join us on the plane. Let's get this party started. You can sign up at sexreimagined.com and let's go to Greece, baby. Unlovable, disgusting, and all this vitriol of this critical voice, things I would say to myself that I would never utter to another human being, nor would I think of another human being this way. And I think about that girl and that real feeling. And standing from this place, I just feel so sad for her that she had to spend so long believing a lie. Can you want to remark on anything like that for yourself?
I think it's coming to me in this moment, which I'd never said quite in this way before. I had deep health challenges in the last year for the first time in my life. So I revisited Joe Dispenza's work. And when people are like, what happened? Like, how did you suddenly get better after a year of sometimes not being able to get out of bed? And I was like, I Joe Dispenza'd it. Like, I was just like, my body knows health. Like, my life force energy knows health. But I couldn't do that until I had healed a deep part of me that was terrified of the next level of my life force energy expression, till I had let go of, seriously, I'll be real with you, an entity. I never really believed in entities before, but an entity that I had taken on when I was being traumatized by my father that was protective and actually leached my life force energy, but also felt protective. And this was only like a few months ago when I was in a space of a teacher I really trust a lot, Tom, who does these workshops called Sapience. And he was like, I believe you have an entity. And I was like, okay, cool. And he went into my booklet and it was totally, it was a full exorcist situation. Like, that thing was not a joke. And I was like, whoa, I did not make that up. Like, that thing was so real. And I could feel my inner little girl who had held on to it so tightly because she was so alone and so scared. And that was her way of feeling safe. And so I couldn't Joe Dispenza it until I had done
Clear
that,
the entity.
pull myself into health until I released the pain and the old trauma that was still lodged in my nervous system. And what I'm feeling right now, I don't know what the word for it would be, but to high priestess it if you want, that you can go, let's say if like the sickest you could be, in a wheelchair or with an autoimmune condition or with cancer, and this miraculous healing that you can do from knowing that your system knows health is like what I hear us talking about right now, what I feel in myself, what I feel in you, Leah, is this deep understanding that my system knows what self-love is. My system actually knows what safety is, what beauty is. My system knows that the goddess loves me deep down inside. And so there was this way of going from an unbelievable amount of self-hatred, exactly what you're talking about. Like I wouldn't even leave the house when I was 18 because I thought I was too ugly for anyone to look at. Like when you have that level of trauma and it folds in on itself, the weight of that energy goes so gnarly. And what I found was that those beliefs weren't true. They just made me feel safe because they kept me small. As long as I hated myself, as long as I was picking myself apart, as long as I was so focused on what was wrong with me, I didn't actually put myself out there to connect with a man because that was terrifying. Not in a real way, not in a soul-bearing kind of way.
You can save yourself from being rejected if you never try to get whatever it is you most want. So you reject yourself first. And for some reason, we think that that's better.
Well, and we believe the self-rejection. It only works as a defense mechanism if you actually believe the lies that you're telling yourself. So I feel like, the beauty of this and the thing I'm feeling right now and talking to you too is like you can high priestess yourself out of even the deepest levels of self-hatred, the deepest levels of self-rejection, the most overwhelming waves of shame and disgust, and find your way back to the human truth, which is actually dignity and beauty and erotic connection and intimacy. And deep down inside, my inner little girl, I could love her so much here and now. That's the only version that matters, right? The version from all the way back in the day doesn't matter, but she gets the love finally that she deserved. Infant Layla gets the love she deserved. And in actually receiving that depth of love, they have freed themselves of the need for me to protect myself with that level of self-hatred anymore. And that's why yesterday I literally was like, was missing. And I was like, I don't ever look at the mirror anymore and think there's anything wrong with me. And that was just my pervasive state of being. And I was like, cheers to that. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee.
Well, you're reminding me, I remember when I was first starting to do Tantra healing work on myself and going through these healing rituals. And, I treated myself the way I wanted a partner to treat me, with a bubble bath and the smelly things and spending money on me and all these things. And I would go and I would touch my chakras and I would breathe and I would put in my hands the things I wish someone else would put in their hands for me. And then I remember the quantum physics idea that the past, the present, and the future are all happening at the same time. And so the love that I felt, I was calling on for my future self. The Leah that was 5 years from now, the Leah that was 10 years from now, the Leah that was 15 years from now, who had already done all of this, who was living in her radiance and doing so many beautiful things, being totally herself, all the things I wanted that didn't have then. I would just have her come and transmit what I'm ready for. And over and over and over again, I've done that through the years. Even now, I'll tune into the Leah that's 60 or 55 and go, help, I don't know how to do this yet. And it's pretty profound.
It's almost like a version of sex magic, where you're calling in that future self and what it feels like and what it looks like. Layla, I just listened to one of your little mini podcast the other day on the 7-day podcast, the 7-day sex magic ritual. It was great. Yeah.
Oh,
share with our audience a little snippet about that.
Yeah. So does your audience know what sex magic is?
Yes, they do. But give us your rendition.
Maybe not everybody, but there'll be some definitely newbies.
Yeah.
So sex magic, which you can actually find in a lot of different ancient cultures now. I found you can find it in indigenous cultures of North America and South America. You can find it in the Celtic traditions. And I did actually find it in a classical tantric text, the Yogini Hridaya, about using the power of eros to shape and manifest in reality. So really, really powerful that this actually has shown up in so many different cultures over time. And the idea with sex magic is that you can use your erotic power to be a more potent manifester. And when I first started doing it, like I already mentioned, I went to Stanford, I studied neurobiology. So I was like, wait, no, I can't be manifesting like amounts of money. Like literally I would see the exact number of people that would be in a program I was launching. I'd do sex magic around that, just health. It was amazing. It was so powerful. And I was like, how the hell is this working? And I really got into what creates manifestation. And so one of the reasons sex magic is so powerful, right? You turn yourself on, you spin your erotic energy and pleasure through the 7 chakra bands. And when it goes all the way up to the crown, you put yourself into a state of peak pleasure or orgasm. You can do it solo or with a partner. And in that state, you step into what I call the 5 senses reality, which is you are immersed in what it is that you want. You taste it, you touch it, you smell it, you see it, hear it, you feel it, right? And in that, what you're doing is you are saying to not just your prefrontal cortex, the part of you that can vision the future, but your entire body, which has way more of your unconscious mind and your unconscious imprinting locked in it. You're speaking to your whole body when you do the visualization. So when most of us are manifesting, we're seeing something over and over again, or we're affirming something, and we're only engaging our spatial visual abilities and our verbal abilities, but we're not necessarily touching our unconscious mind. So what makes sex magic so powerful is you're actually bringing your unconscious mind online. So in the tantric practices, activating the chakras is a code for connecting all the parts of your brain. So when you actually put yourself in the vision of your manifestation, your whole brain is connected and online, and your whole body is attuned and listening. At the same time, you've put yourself into one of the highest states of vibration possible, which is the orgasmic state of pleasure. And most of the time, I'd say almost every time, with some karmic or environmental exceptions, if you say you want something, but you're not getting it, like that is reasonably available, like a healthy partnership, right? Or a reasonable amount of money you can make, a reasonable amount of success, a reasonable amount of health, right? And you don't have it, it's because some part of your nervous system is still afraid. And what sex magic does is it actually puts you in the reality of that thing that you most want and allows deep locks in your nervous system to re-imprint that this is actually pleasurable. This is actually safe to have this. And I haven't come across another manifesting tool that creates that level of pleasure and safety as an imprint with the manifestation. But what I will say to answer Dr. Willow's question is just that in doing sex magic, it's like, wow, this is so powerful. And you actually referenced this, Leah, earlier, which is that when you make a big leap forward, there's often a grief that you didn't have the thing before. And if we don't give ourselves space to process the grief will actually stick us in the old habit pattern. So I shared a sex magic practice that I developed because I was ready to call in my partner. And prior to that, right, I had separated from an 8.5-year partnership that was beautiful, but it was also not my, I just knew it wasn't my truth. And it took a lot of courage to leave. And in the interim period, a couple of times I was like, I want to call in my king. And I would listen to myself and I was like, that's bullshit. You don't actually want to call in your king. I don't know what you want, but you don't want that, because I would say it and it wasn't coherent in my being. So I did a lot of work, a lot of healing, had some disastrous experiences, some really wondrous experiences. And finally I was like, I'm fucking ready. And I was like, okay, once I became ready, all the grief hit that I had never let myself be ready before. Wow. All the grief, even of having been in good relationships with really good men, even that past partnership was so beautiful in so many ways. And there were so many times where I could not receive the love and the devotion, that I was still too terrified, still too caught up in my own trauma. And I felt that to actually call in this man and the level of power match and conscious partnership that I really wanted, I would have to grieve all of the times that I hadn't let myself have that. Because as soon as I could have it, I could realize that I didn't let myself have it. And so I did this ritual leading into Burning Man, where I did 7 mornings of grief ritual. So I would put on a clock for like 15 or 30 minutes, and I would let myself grieve and sob, and I'd hit pillows, and I'd cry, and I'd be in sorrow, and I'd be like full victim, like I'd have it's there. What am I doing? What? Right. And then in the evening or afternoon, I would do sex magic, and I chose 7 different qualities I wanted in my partnership. And I did sex magic on each quality. So I called in the reality of feeling devotion from my partner, and the reality of having a shared tantric practice, and the reality of feeling emotionally safe, and the reality of it like hot and like a playmate connection and an intellectual match. So I did 7 different sex magic, 7 different grieving rituals, and literally met my partner like a few days later. So it was
of course you did, darling.
It
makes total sense. Brilliant.
I love that metaphor you gave in that episode of like, if you've got a like a chalice cup and you want to put the love of your life in there, you want to put your amazing health or your abundant bank account in that chalice, like whatever it is that you're manifesting. If there's too much of the grief, the shadow of the lack, of never not having, of the anger, of the fear, of the doubt, of the insecurity, if there's too much of that in your chalice, then you can't fill it up with that thing that you want so bad.
Oh, so that's a really good point.
I've been teaching my women this sex magic practice. We're doing a year of sex magic practice. And I'm like, gosh, how much can we draw on and pull on in relationship to manifesting through our arrows? So I'm real into Joe Dispenza too, and like talk about, basically teaching Tantra to the world, to the muggles of the world. It's fantastic. I love it. So it's really fun I love that episode because it gave me some new nuggets and some new ideas and just some new inspiration around like, offering even more to the women in my sphere.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
I also really learned something big around it with my health recently, because I had this realization. It was probably like 8 months into being sick. And I was like, you have not sex magicked your health. And I was like, how could you not be sex magicking your health? Like literally, this is a relentless level of exhaustion and fatigue. And it was so intense. And I was thinking about it, and I realized I don't actually want to be healthy. And I was,
yeah.
And then I was like, why don't I want to be healthy? And that question allowed me to do a certain amount of healing work. And then I was able to start doing sex magic on my health. And that quality of deep coherence and gnosis, just a deep, unwavering knowing of what is within you and what you're creating and what your reality is. It's like if it sits on top of uncried tears or ungrieved grief or unhealed trauma, unraged anger, it won't stick. And so if it's not sticking or you can't get yourself to sex magic it, it's great to say, well, why not? Like, what do I want
What is
more?
It about that I want this illness or this not having a partner or not having the abundance or the success or whatever the fuck it is. Now, what's your process for going there? Can you just like sit there and it comes to you? I know I've been running my women through Carolyn Elliott's deepest fear inventory, which is like, I would absolutely hate to find the love of my life, or I would absolutely despise making $60,000 a month because I have deep fear that I will have to pay astronomical taxes, or I have deep fear that I will still not feel successful in financial abundance, right? Like all these fears. And so what they're seeing as they do this practice is things that they have that they couldn't see before because they're now bringing the unconscious to the light. Even some of them I do private coaching with, and I've said these, I'm like, well, you probably aren't finding, that partner because it would mean you would have to commit. But they can't hear it from me, right? They're now getting this like, wow, I'm afraid of commitment, because they're actually going through the practice and getting it from themselves. So I'm just curious, like, do you have some other fun practice that you do, or for you, is it just like, let me just sit down and be real honest with myself? I actually want to be sick.
I don't think any practice beats just being honest with yourself.
Yeah.
So
That's
the
true.
phrase I like to say to people that I came up with a long time ago is act like you took MDMA, like a truth serum, right? I don't take a lot of Molly. I get a horrible 2-day hangover. I'm like, God hates me and only me. But when you take MDMA, there's a quality where you start speaking truth, right? You just tell the truth. If MDMA doesn't work for you, it's a truth serum, right? You take a truth serum and you're talking to God.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do not lie to God on a truth serum, and practice being that ruthlessly honest with yourself. Because a lot of us don't hold ourselves to that standard. It's like, if I bullshit myself a little bit, or if I tell myself something that makes me feel just a little bit comfortable, or a lot of us have a tremendous amount of shame around how we're actually operating in deeply egoic ways, which every human is
denial.
doing. Yeah.
Straight
And
up
so we're just like,
denial.
no, I can't possibly be doing that. And so practicing telling yourself the truth, which is a practice over a lifetime, helps you hear the truth and let you know when you're not telling yourself the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I do love a good somatic body scan. So it's like, okay, I want this thing. I'm going to vision this thing. So let's say I'm saying I want partnership. I'm going to actually vision my dream partner coming to me, picking me up and doing the thing maybe that I most want, like making love to me or proposing marriage, or, saying I'm like, we're going to make a baby, like whatever it is. And then scanning your body and finding, where is there any contraction? Where is there fear? Where is there dissociation? Because our unconscious lives in these spaces in our body and our nervous system. So when you scan through it and look for those places as you're actually visualizing the thing that you most want, you will often uncover things, especially if you're not very verbal or mental. You can find things that are hidden in your body.
Yeah, that somatic experiencing and releasing of all somatic, like where the blocks are, and talking to the places in your body, and even seeing them like, oh, there's a stuck. So many women get that right between the heart and the throat, obviously, right? And so like, what is the sensation there? It's tight. It feels, like I can't breathe very well. And then if they start to visualize it, they see all different kinds of things, anything from like, images of their transgressor to like, red spiky balls.
Right. Or being in front of the class in third grade and freezing when you're supposed
Yes.
to do something in front of everybody.
Totally.
Which just reminds me of the old saying, the issues are in the tissues.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's so much more than in your head, baby. If you really want to get to purify yourself from
And
the
transform.
blocks and the pain and the owies and the hot spots, you can't just work it up here, which is the old therapeutic model. You got to be able to go into the body and investigate. And now, after everything that's just been said, I finally do remember what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Which leads into, I think, what both of you have been discussing. And that is, so many women have a hard time reaching climaxes, having what they would call orgasms, feeling like it's always elusive to them, and especially on demand. So having a practice where they think they have to have an orgasm at the end for something to work could be a sticking point. So I'm wondering, how do you help those that really want the sex magic practice, but when they hear that a climax is involved, they're like, fuck, I'm gonna fail. I'm not good at that.
Yeah. So what I always say is, what's important is not that you absolutely climax, but that you go into a peak state of pleasure, and the most peak state of pleasure available to you in that moment. And people who first start doing sex magic, sometimes they don't feel pleasure. Sometimes there is dissociation. Sometimes there is numbing out. And I even say that, we'll do 100% sex magic rituals in my trainings. And I'll say, if you've never done sex magic with 100 people before, I've orgasmed in a room full of this many wild
lots
screaming.
of mirror neurons to work with there.
I was like, be gentle with yourself. It's a new experience for your body and your mind and your nervous system. So give yourself some patience and some compassion
grace.
And some slowness and some grace. And even I had a man a long time ago. He was one of the first men who ever came to my all gender sex magic. And he's like a big known, figure in the business world. I won't reveal his name, but he actually tells everyone that he did this. He's like, I came to Layla's backyard and did sex magic in 2020. And I was like, that's true. And the reason that I name that is sometimes I think people have these perceptions that men at some of the highest levels of power in society like don't do this sort of thing. And they do, and they take to it, and they're so excited. But his big piece when he called me up was like, what if I don't have an erection? I was like, you don't have to have an erection. He's like, really? What if I don't feel turned on? And I was like, you don't have to feel turned on. The idea is to be there, to work with the energy, to cultivate whatever arises for you,
Right.
and be with the process. And if something comes up besides pleasure, then there's healing to be done. And he had the most magnificent experience with a flaccid penis the entire time, just like lying in the backyard. And it healed him of something so profound. And he's gone on now to have much deeper, more erotic practices. I have not seen anyone do sex magic over a long period of time that doesn't start to cultivate a deeper ability to have peak states of pleasure or easier orgasms that are more on tap, because that is something you can build. But for people who feel absolutely nothing in the beginning, or even for men who don't have erection, it's not meant to be a practice that pushes you towards something, but it is meant to be a practice where over time you cultivate an ability to get super turned on doing it. And there is a kind of Pavlovian response. I wish there's a cooler metaphor for that, but like Pavlovian response, you're like, time for sex magic, and your pussy's like,
Yeah, like even if that there's something always to discover.
yes.
No matter the outcome, there's always something to discover. And can you be curious, even when you're like, I didn't feel any arousal? You could go, it's interesting. I didn't feel that much arousal. And just that little bit of tone shift, that little bit of perspective shift, I think then can lead you to the other things that might be covered up that want to unfurl so that you can reach more of that ecstasy that is available to you. Sometimes we just have layers of stuff covering it up, and we have to be brave to go, let me feel everything, no matter what it is. Let me finish metabolizing the layers that might be on top of my bliss.
And
Because there's
sometimes we don't
only
even
one
know-
way to it. You got to kind of encounter all of the parts of yourself, the good and the yucky.
And sometimes we don't know what it is. There's no story attached to it. Like, that's one of the beautiful things about all the tantric practices is you don't have to have a trauma attached to it, or a story attached to it, or a timeline attached to it. It could just be like emotion coming up and coming out, or physical things coming up and coming out, shooting sharp, experiences that move through your body. And what they're basically doing is opening up stagnant chi in your meridians so that you can actually start to run more pleasure and more erotic arousal sensations through those meridians, and become more of yourself, like fill yourself up with your essence.
It's like,
even more.
I'm wondering why I'm psychic vomiting right now. All I'm doing is gacking. Oh, now I'm burping? What the fuck is going on?
Yeah,
And it's just
burping
like,
can happen. All kinds
Sopranos,
of
baby.
things.
Just let it out.
Well, you're touching on an excellent point, which is culturally, obviously, most of us are carrying the story that sex needs to be about pleasure, and anything erotic must feel pleasurable.
Right.
That will not be triggering to your audience, but is surprisingly or not surprisingly triggering to the rest of the world when I say that sex is the active form of meditation, and meditation is the still form of sex. So if you sit down to meditate, sometimes you're like you're burping, you're shaking, there's like an energy awakening. Sometimes something's processing through you. Sometimes it's deep peace. Sometimes it's unity, oneness. But the point is that you showed up and did it, not that you felt any particular thing. And sexual experiences have that same quality, actually, that it really is whatever is here. And what's also amazing is for people who do plant medicine, real erotic activation is much more like what you would experience in a plant medicine ceremony, where, yes, you're psychically vomiting up egoic limitation from your solar plexus so that your energy can flow through your entire being and you can express the full force of your power. It gets a lot wilder and a lot weirder than people ever imagine sex to be, because we're actually repressing the hell out of how free our bodies would really be. Your body is designed to be as free as it would be in an ayahuasca ceremony, of the shaking and the spiritual downloads and the release of energy. And it doesn't happen that often, doesn't need to happen all the time, but I physically vomited during sex. Like when you're really actually letting energy, life force flow all the way through you, you get to a level of surrender and majesty and ecstasy. And I don't care how you get there, whether it's kink, whether it's deep in loveness, whether it's power dynamics, whether it's being
meditation,
deity,
whether it's being
yeah.
celibate, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the feeling we're all hungry for. And that's the feeling that we want during sex. And ironically, that experience comes through allowing anything that's not pleasure, but is aliveness itself moving through you. And then the much deeper ecstasy comes through.
Yeah, I think that people are afraid to go through that portal, across that threshold of like, oh, that's uncomfortable and I want to scream this out or I want to vomit this out. Can't tell you how many times I sat in that Joe Dispenza meditation hall, like feeling like I need a fucking throw up bag right here, right now, because like so much energy is moving up and breaking through the blocks in each one of the chakras. And so it's just, it's scary. You have to surrender into the unknown, and the unknown is scary. So, that's one of the things that he's always touting, is to fall in love with the unknown. And I think that is so, so true in relationship to breaking through sexually.
This is funny. I have to tell the story because it's reminding me of all of this. I grew up the first 10 years of my life. My parents were Pentecostal, so we went to church and people speaking in tongues and the Holy Spirit and praying. And they were actually doing Shaktipat, but this was a Christian thing. So I don't know how that tradition got into this tradition, but it's really fun to like be grown up and notice the threads. And we left that church, and then I got baptized into Catholicism, Layla, and then had to go to Catholic school. So I have these very strange Christian things that got woven into my conditioning. And I'm well into my Tantra life and did MDMA one night and had like the most incredible Tantric lovemaking. All the memories are so beautiful. And then I hit a thing, like this massive thing. I remember having the female ejaculation. And when I looked at the towel, it was the color of a dark rain cloud. It was like gray, and I was sobbing. It was like spirit came in and then washed through all my chakras, and I released so much of the contraction that came from that sexual abuse as a kid that was still living there. And it was like, we are cleaning this shit out. And then right afterward, I started speaking in tongues. Yeah. I believe in speaking in tongues, which is like extra hilarious. I'm like, oh, and that is all so fucking fake. People are telling themselves like this grand story, and here, and then my partner at the time, just for fun, started speaking it back to me. And he's just like making it up too. And so interesting how our subconscious is trying to reconcile parts of our conditioning, and that there is something that medicine can open us up to, that opens our bodies and our psyches. I might have been able to discover that on the natch. We'll never know unless it happens again. Probably not, though.
Well, the thing that I've studied with energy phenomenon and in working with Kundalini energy and life force energy is that so many of our spiritual traditions are doing what the human body does naturally when life force energy moves through it. So one of the things that I've seen is that speaking in tongues or light language happens when Shakti or life force energy truly penetrates the third eye. Mm-hmm. And it's different types of speaking in tongues and different types of light language, but it's a pretty universal phenomenon. And there's lots of other things too. When, for instance, life force energy pulsates through the center of the womb, your tongue comes out. And what's interesting is Kali and Tara, some of the goddesses from the Tantric tradition and the Hindu tradition, they are representative of the lower chakras, and they have their tongues sticking out. Yeah, and what's happened is when religion goes bad, right? When it starts to co-opt our connection to the divine in service of somebody else's power, it takes these beautiful capacities that we all have and teaches us like who we have to be in order to access them, or what God is, or restricts us, right? So for instance, the Catholic Church, in a whole rampage to control like the entire continent of Europe, for instance, taught people that shaking is demonic, but shaking is
Right.
what happens when life force energy moves through you. So there's these
Right.
very subtle blocks that we have in the way that energy moves through our bodies. And it actually goes all the way back to religious programming that is designed to teach us from designed to keep us from finding that pathway to God, Goddess, ourselves. And when you're talking, like when we were first starting this interview, right, besides all the sexual pieces that drew me to Tantra, there was a deep spiritual tradition that existed very globally, but surely all over Europe and in the Middle East and definitely in India. And a deep part of those practices, which was not only goddess worship and having high priestesses who were part of the guardianship of spiritual practice, but also erotic practices. It was part and parcel, like a way of worshiping the divine was to work with erotic energy, was to work with orgasmic energy. And so many people think it's like, oh, it's this aberration of, whatever Westerners like sexualizing everything. And it's not that that's not happening sometimes in some places, but there is this remembrance in our bodies that when Shakti and energy is flowing through you, you are singing and dancing and in oneness with all the divine. And what starts happening is erotic. And what starts happening is speaking in tongues. And what starts happening is all of these beautiful energy phenomenon. And the reason I think it's so important to name it, including, energetic purging and things like that, is because these are sacred practices of high priestess traditions that many of us got programmed to be afraid of, or now we only think are possible, like if we take plant medicine, but actually that is our nervous system's natural response to the elevated ecstatic presence of sacred energy within us. And so those movements are super holy. And so when I'm talking about sex, incorporating those movements, it's not because it needs to be weird or out there. It's literally because when you are so surrendered that you will allow that amount of energy to flow through your body during sex, those are the kinds of things that will start happening. So it's a very slow unwinding of all the ways that we've repressed ourselves as humans for thousands of years, so we can return to this rightful state of erotic liberation.
Oh, girl, you speak our language so beautifully.
I'm talking to some sexy priestesses right now.
What brings to mind some realization for me in this moment is when you've had religious trauma, especially when the messaging is so defined for who you're supposed to be purity-wise as a woman. And then what feels like all these religious lies, when you move away from it and then you want to dance towards spirituality, it's kind of like you throw it all away. Because you have so many lies or so many untruths come to you in this form, it's hard to hold on or to decipher what part of the essence of that tradition is still valuable to you when you become a seeker of something else.
Yeah.
So I'm just sort of in the awareness of that. One of the things that was different between the Pentecostal and the Catholic piece was when we were Pentecostal, I knew I had a direct relationship to God. When we became Catholic, I had to go through a saint.
Yeah. And that's why the Pentecostals will allow you to speak in tongues and shake. Because they're like, yo, it's your pathway. Go for it. Whereas like in Catholicism, they're like, don't you dare or you would discover.
That's right. That's right. You got to go through a priest, a nun, a saint, somebody. So yeah, anyways, I'm just thank you for that. Just sitting with that.
And it's been amazing to me. I mean, I asked ChatGPT some pretty serious questions because I'd done some religious excavation, obviously, and what are these priestess traditions and how was the original Judaism and then Catholicism at war with high priestess religions and how all of that went down and how all that happened. But what was really fascinating to me is I really was like, how come the Jewish tradition is so much cooler about sex? And it was that it is harder. Only some. It's a big tradition. Yes. Some of them are cool.
Fucking through a sheet.
That's true. That's actually true. But that part of the tradition is that to be a good husband is to give your wife orgasms. And, to be a rabbi in most traditions is to be married, right? To actually have a sex life, to be, all of that. And what's fascinating is Jesus was a Jewish rabbi, so he would have been teaching in that tradition. And unless he said anything other than that, that way it would have been implied that was part of what he believed. And it really wasn't until St. Augustine came along, and St. Paul, who
Yep.
was actually like a player, like a hedonistic player. And he had
Yes.
like all this repentance and guilt. And he was just like, nobody fucked anybody. That's the
Yes.
pathway to God. And I was like, bro, how did you ruin so much for so many people just because you couldn't keep it in your pants for a little while?
Totally. And he's the one that came up with the whole original sin and the Adam and Eve. Like, he's
Such a bummer.
responsible for some really fucked up sexual consequences. So everyone go read a New York Times article on St. Augustine. It'll blow your mind.
And it's only important for people to know because I think there is still this doubt of like, but can sex really be holy? Like, can it really be part of a spiritual tradition, but at least celebrated by a spiritual tradition? And it's like, yes, it's actually not that strange, even through the Christian tradition.
True.
And then all the way into traditions that celebrate it as an active prayer, as it is.
I mean, the Pentecostal faith that I was a part of, they really revered the union of a man and a woman, of course, man and a woman, and it had to be marriage and they had to be virgins. But once they could cover those things, then it really was spoken about as something exquisitely beautiful and loving. Now, I want to segue. We only have a few minutes left. But
Okay, great. I just also want to say that even though I never really touched the Pentecostal experience that much, from a distance, I was like, they got snakes.
they have spirit, baby.
Speaking in tongues. Like, I don't know that we're like exactly the same family, but like there's something there.
There's something
something
tantric going
totally
on
there.
over there.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I grieved so much when we left. I didn't understand why we were leaving because it was such a home for me. I was looking at one of your podcast episodes, and I found this line very interesting. I want you to comment on it. How to break free from the story we have to be special and worthy. Because so many of us, especially in the pursuit of relationship, want to be special. I have been obsessed with the need to be special for so many different periods of my life. It's really been an interesting effort to not be special. So what do you have to say?
Yeah. I would say if you've spent your experience of life so far feeling unworthy and telling yourself that you're not special, then the medicine for that person, right, because medicine is so specific, would be build the nervous system capacity to know that you actually are worthy and build the nervous system capacity to experience when you are doing something that's special or remarkable or beautiful. Like, we all deserve to have that. And those binaries become a deep trap of the ego, a deep trap of needing to have a particular identity, an identity of being special, an identity of being worthy, an identity of not being special, an identity of not being worthy. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking good, healthy personal development for most women, let's say, I'd say feeling worthy and letting yourself feel special can be part of your personal growth and evolution and part of your re-empowerment from a culture that would have happily torn you down. And by the way, most men actually feel very unworthy and very unspecial as well. So for the most part, them working on that is very important. And when I'm talking about that quote specifically, there then becomes this very potent way, and I did it for a long time and still do it to a certain degree, where the spiritual gifts that we all have, an ability to be psychic, an ability to have tremendous amount of energetic power, an ability to download wisdom from higher, deeper places within us. It's like the part of us that is desperate to feel special or desperate to feel more worthy will cling to it as, now I am this special spiritual person, or I'm especially worthy to God.
Or to be recognized by others as being so special and all the things.
Yeah. And one of the best things one of my teachers told me, so one of my mentors along the way, Ernest Morrow, he teaches very left-handed tantric kind of direct awakening practices. And this is like years ago. And I used to do sessions with him on the floor of my closet because it was the only place I could go in the house where like nobody could hear me. So I was like lying on the floor of my closet. He was like, "You're not special." And I was like, "You must haven't done." You know, when you're just like letting like the part of you that is, you know, whatever, wants to fight your coach or your mentor, or die on a hill of being a Kundalini sparkle pony. And so I was like really in this thing of like, no, I am special, and owning the part of me that does believe that in an attempt to reveal it and make it very real. And he was like, your specialness, the degree of your specialness is so insignificant compared to the universal magnitude of the specialness of any human being.
Yeah.
And that I really got. And I think that's where,
That's beautiful.
oh, I'm so special. Like I can whatever, do these tricks, or like my pussy is this orgasmic, or like whatever it is, right? Yeah, maybe my pussy's a little bit more orgasmic, or maybe I have a kind of, connection to wisdom right now, but so does everybody else in their own way. And in every little domain that I can find where I have specialness, so does every other human in their own signature. But at the end of the day, all of that means nothing to the fucking miracle of what it is to be a human. And I don't know about you all, but I got so conditioned by like 1990s America of like, you gotta be the prettiest, the sparkliest and all that. And then it's so easy to just transfer your deep longing to feel worthy onto your spiritual path, and to start utilizing the spiritual gifts or the wisdom or the things that you accrue as a way to prove to yourself that you actually are that amazing, that you actually are that worthy. And there's something so much deeper than that that is wordless and eternal and beyond any of that play that maintains its eternal, there's not even something I can say to it, but power, consciousness, everythingness, love, with or without being special, with or without spiritual gifts, with or without a man, with or without orgasms. And to know that thing and to know yourself as that thing, that is actual Tantra. So
Yeah, like
it gets to the heart of it.
that's like the big
So beautiful.
non-dual piece. It's like, what is special? Consciousness is special. What is consciousness? It's in me, it's in you, it's in all of us. Like the same consciousness looking out my eyes is looking out your eyes. And that is what is special. Leah doesn't need to be special. I'm just
Right.
connected to the consciousness. And it has so many variety of specialness.
And I want to say to everyone, to everyone listening,
to it.
I have really experienced that anybody, when they love their inner child just a little bit more and become slightly less defended and protected, everybody becomes fascinating. Literally everybody. There's not a boring person on earth. What is boring is the fucking trauma making you
protection.
feel that you
Holding
have
you
to wear a
back.
mask, and masks are boring.
Guarded.
Or your inner child telling you that you're unlovable and the world is unsafe. And so you shut down all of your creativity and all of your spark or all of your whatever thing you were here to express. I have seen time and time again that the moment humans remove even just a modicum of that, they become so fascinating, so fascinating. So just know that if you're sitting there at home, that is absolutely true.
Oh, well, that's a beautiful thing to encourage us all to get in touch with, is our pre-wounded inner child, and to look at the world through that place. And it would be impossible not to have a great time. You want to have more fun, more pleasure,
Such a
more
curious
generosity.
little one
you
in
just
there.
get into that pre-wounded
Yeah.
inner child and have a field day.
I love it.
Oh,
Well, tell
Love
us
it.
a little bit, Layla, how people could find you and about your program, VITA.
yeah. LaylaMartin.com, signing up with your email address. So my email is still actually the best way to get my teachings and everything that I create and release into the world. I also have a podcast, This Tantric Life, and you can follow me on the Layla Martin at Instagram. I've been shadow banned, so you actually have to put in the Layla Martin or else you can't find me. Layla Martin won't work. And then I have a certification called VITA Coaching. It is a 1 year. It actually works out to be 2 years once you've done all your graduation requirements. Initiation into being a sex, love, and relationship coach from a tantric approach. So much of what I've been talking about here, tools and practices built on this philosophy and this understanding in order to transform people's lives. And there will be a live event that is totally free, and it'll be happening probably pretty soon after this podcast comes out. And it is called Your Future is Erotic. So if you're interested in that, you can find information about that. Possibly you all will be linking to it. You can also find it on my website or by getting on my email address. Email list. You will not miss it.
And are these events open for men and women?
So Your Life is Erotic will be for anyone, actually. VITA Coaching right now is for women or female identified, feminine identified, even gender non-conforming beings. But you got to have some kind of alignment with the feminine, or it's going to be not satisfying to be in there. And I'm going to be doing VITA coaching in the future in a way that also includes men.
Great.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah.
I know so
Thank
many
you
women
so
have
much.
done the VITA coaching and they just always come
Yeah.
out radiant and loving it. So,
Yes. Everyone always has high marks to say about it.
yeah.
So congratulations.
Thank you so much. It is a
Yeah.
really, really special program.
Well, we look forward to our paths crossing again. Thank you so much for giving us your time.
Yeah.
And everyone else, stay tuned because you know what's up next. It's the Dishity Doodah.
We'll see you there.
Now, our favorite part, the dish.
Well, that was fun. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I've known of Layla for I don't know how many years now, at least 15 or so, and it's mostly because of a girlfriend that you know of, my friend. I won't mention her name, but she loves Layla, and so she's been telling me about her for years, and I just have haven't had the time or the bandwidth to really fully check out her work, but it was so great to kind of sit with her from a fresh perspective of not really knowing her work. I listened to a few podcasts as we were prepping for this, and it's like she's so been on the tantric path for such a long time and studied so many of the classics and the neo tantra and so many different layers and levels of it. So was really fun to just get to know her from that beginner's mindset,
Yeah. Yeah, I really loved her full investigation of sex magic. I've had sex magic in two very important compartments in my life that were really worked out beautifully for me between finding a home and finding a husband. But it's not something I feel called to do all the time. I don't know why. It's just not a yes. But hearing her talk about it,
I was
and
hoping
even though it's
something was opening up for you.
similar to my own, teachings of it, it's fresh, right? And so
Yeah.
some doors cracked open. I'm a
Good.
little more open to it.
Good.
And
good.
have some things in my life that I would like to see go smoother. So
Yeah,
great
and
opportunity to investigate that again.
I think that the grief ritual added to the to before the sex magic practice is really, really potent and really important. I've been guiding my women on what I've been learning and playing with, which is a complaint container, or you could also call it the hidden desires container. And this is from the Light Dark Institute. And
Reminds
it's
me
like
of swamping from Mama
so
Gina.
it's similar, yeah. Like you set a timer for 5 minutes and you just fucking let it rip and you throw pillows and you hit the couch and you scream and you yell and you just like let all the complaints go about whatever it is that's sort of like filling your chalice and getting in the way of you actually calling in the thing that you want. So really powerful. Both of those practice the grief ritual, and both that and the hidden desires, or AKA complaint container, can totally empty you out to a place where you can get to those even deeper desires that you really, really want to see come to fruition in your life. And then you make love to that desire rather than the surface level, like, I just don't want to be alone anymore. I just don't want to be struggling with finances anymore, or whatever it is,
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant addition to preparing the vessel for being able to live more fully in to this thing that is going to become your reality, to feel that reality. It makes sense you'd have to do some purifying of the stuff that's weighing you down and blocking you from having that in the first place. Genius.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Layla Martin. Yeah, Layla Martin. Tell us friend of the show.
Yeah. Tell us what you thought. Tell us what you loved. Tell us what you want more of.
Yeah. You know what? I almost, before the interview happened, thought I might want to take this into the direction of two different things that we didn't get into. One was BDSM, because she is exploring that, and she's had a couple of really interesting guests on her show talking about it. And so it would have been fun to get her take on what's new for her in her life that she's investigating. And And also just maybe having her speak a little bit more about conscious uncoupling and how much, because she's been very public about that breakup. But it was really fun to hear about this new person in her life and all the stuff she had to do in order to call that in. I thought that was a great example.
Yeah, that was a great, And we'll put a link to the episode that I was talking about her sex magic. It's only like a 30 or 40 minute little solo episode that she recorded.
Okay. I hope everyone has a fun day and that you enjoyed the beautiful Layla Martin. We love you. Remember, if you want to help the show grow, you got to subscribe, baby. And those comments move us right along. We love them and we will answer them. Ciao.
Thanks for tuning in. This episode was hosted by Tantric Sex Master Coach and Positive Psychology Facilitator Leah Piper, as well as by Chinese and Functional Medicine Doctor and Taoist Sexology Teacher Dr. Willow Brown. Don't forget, your comments, likes, subscribes, and suggestions matter. Let's realize this new world together.
Hey guys, what would it be like if you could last 10 times longer when you're having sex?
We are going to teach you how to gain massive confidence as a lover, all without performance anxiety, gimmicks, or prescription.
This course is perfect for you if you've ever been mortified by a sexual encounter that ended way too early.
Or if you've ever avoided intimacy out of fear that you won't last as long as your lover desires. Or maybe you long to give your partner multiple orgasms but can't last long enough to make that a reality.
Well, good news, we've got your back, and it's in our course, Last 10 Times Longer. Go to sexreimagined.com/last-10x-longer.
And for all of our favorite listeners out there, we are giving you a discount, 20% off, y'all. Just put in podcast 20, all caps, podcast 20. To get your 20% off of this phenomenal course that you're going to want to review more than once.
We cannot wait to see you inside this course. Plus, don't forget, we always got tons of bonuses. See you there.